the waning light of an autumn day, the air held a crisp bite, foreshadowing the winter to come. Amelia stood on the edge of the highway, her thumb extended and her heart pounding with each passing car. Her auburn hair, caught in the cool breeze, danced around her face as she adjusted the strap of her worn backpack. She had been on the road for days, hitchhiking her way across the country, searching for adventure, for meaning, for something to fill the void left by her mundane life. As dusk settled in, a dusty blue pickup truck slowed to a stop beside her. The driver, a middle-aged man with a kind smile and weathered face, leaned over to open the passenger door. "Need a lift?" he asked, his voice gruff but gentle. Amelia hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, please. I'm heading west." "Well, hop in. I'm headed that way," he replied, motioning for her to get in. The man introduced himself as Frank. His eyes crinkled at the corners, and his voice carried the weight of countless miles traveled. Amelia felt a flicker of relief. He seemed trustworthy, the kind of man who would have a family, perhaps a dog waiting at home. She settled into the seat, and they drove off into the deepening twilight. The conversation flowed easily at first, with Frank sharing tales of his own travels, his job as a long-haul trucker, and stories of his family. But as the night grew darker, the atmosphere in the truck shifted. Frank's demeanor changed subtly, his smile faded, and his eyes grew colder, more calculating. He began asking Amelia personal questions, prying into her life in a way that made her uncomfortable. She deflected as best she could, her unease growing with each passing mile. The highway stretched out like a ribbon through the endless expanse of trees, and Amelia's hope of finding safety dwindled with every turn. She tried to keep calm, but her instincts screamed that something was very wrong. The landscape outside grew more desolate, the towns fewer and farther between. When Frank finally pulled off the main road onto a deserted dirt track, her heart sank. "Just a quick detour," he said, his voice now devoid of warmth. "Shortcut to avoid the tolls." Amelia's fingers gripped the seatbelt tightly. She knew she had made a terrible mistake. The truck bumped along the rough path, trees closing in around them like silent sentinels. Her mind raced, searching for a plan, an escape. The truck finally came to a stop in front of an old, dilapidated cabin, hidden deep within the forest. Frank turned to her, his eyes now predatory. "End of the line," he said, his voice chillingly calm. Amelia's pulse thundered in her ears. She knew she had to act fast. As Frank reached over to grab her arm, she unbuckled her seatbelt and bolted from the truck. She sprinted into the forest, branches tearing at her clothes and skin. Behind her, she could hear Frank cursing, the sound of his footsteps pounding the earth as he gave chase. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and twisted roots, but Amelia pushed forward, driven by sheer terror. She stumbled and fell, her hands and knees scraping against the rough ground. But she forced herself to get up and keep running. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her vision blurred with tears. Just when she thought she couldn't go on any longer, she burst into a clearing. The moonlight illuminated an old, abandoned farmhouse. With no other option, she ran inside, her heart hammering in her chest. She found a narrow staircase and climbed to the attic, hiding behind a pile of old boxes and crates. She tried to calm her breathing, to make herself as small and quiet as possible. Minutes passed like hours. She could hear Frank searching the house below, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't find her. The attic was a silent witness to her fear, the dust motes dancing in the moonlight as if mocking her plight. Then the footsteps stopped. The silence was deafening. Amelia dared not move, her muscles aching from the tension. She closed her eyes, willing herself to become invisible. Suddenly, the trapdoor to the attic creaked open. Frank's head appeared, his eyes scanning the room. Amelia's heart nearly stopped. She bit her lip to stifle a sob, her body trembling uncontrollably. Frank's gaze lingered for a moment, then he stepped back, closing the trapdoor. She heard his footsteps retreating, the sound growing fainter until there was nothing but the oppressive silence. Amelia waited, her mind racing. She couldn't stay there. She had to keep moving, had to find help. She crept down the stairs, every creak and groan of the old wood amplified in her ears. The house was empty, the front door ajar. She stepped outside, the cold night air biting her skin. She had no idea where she was, but she knew she had to get back to the highway. She stumbled through the forest, the distant hum of the highway her only guide. Hours passed, and just as dawn began to break, she emerged from the trees onto the asphalt. Her relief was short-lived. Frank's truck was there, parked on the side of the road, waiting. Frank himself stood leaning against the hood, his arms crossed, a cold smile on his face. "Thought you could get away, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with menace. Despair washed over Amelia. She backed away, her mind frantic for a solution, any way out. But before she could react, Frank lunged at her, his hands grabbing her arms with bruising force. Amelia fought back with every ounce of strength she had left, kicking and screaming, but Frank was too strong. He dragged her back towards the truck, his grip like iron. She knew if he got her inside, she would never escape. Summoning the last of her energy, she twisted free and ran towards the edge of the highway. Without looking, she dashed into the path of an oncoming car. The screech of brakes filled the air, followed by a sickening thud. The world spun and then went black. When Amelia regained consciousness, she was lying on the roadside, her body broken and battered. A group of people stood around her, their faces blurred and concerned. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance. She had escaped Frank, but at a terrible cost. As she was lifted onto a stretcher, the faces of the paramedics came into focus. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, held her hand. "You're safe now," she said softly. "We'll take care of you." Tears streamed down Amelia's face. She had survived, but the harrowing experience would haunt her forever. She had trusted the wrong man on the highway, and it had nearly cost her everything. As the ambulance doors closed, Amelia vowed never to trust so easily again. The highway, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, now loomed in her mind as a shadowy reminder of the dangers lurking in the unknown.